Over the next several videos, we're going to look at how to work with forms. I can't say it's glamorous, but it's very common and touches lots of different little ways of working with JavaScript. We have a little store page on H+ Sport here, where we're going to choose some products, where we want to ship them, and calculate how much we expect to pay. This is simplified from what you'd see on a real store's website, so we can keep our concerns relatively modest. This is the before state. My form elements work. I can select from different states here and choose my radio buttons and checkboxes and such. When I click this button, the page refreshes, and nothing has actually happened. Let's take a look at where we're going with this project. This is the after state. Once again, I can choose some items, choose a state, and then estimate my total. And now I have an actual calculation with a little bit of information about what I'm paying for shipping and the tax that I'm paying. Switching over here to Visual Studio Code, we can look at the HTML. This is a static version of a WordPress site, so there's lots of markup, lots of CSS, and a whole bunch of existing JavaScript. This kind of illustrates how an even relatively simple page can get pretty complicated when you look at the guts. Scrolling all the way down to the bottom of the file, here's a script tag that references our JavaScript file. If I hold down the Command key and click it, it opens it up for me. We're going to look at that a little later. Let's scroll up again to the HTML for the actual form that we're building that's special on this page and actually used in our project. This page has IDs and classes all over the place. This is important for CSS styling, but it's probably even more important for our purposes in JavaScript. If possible, having IDs like these on your elements is really helpful. If your CMS or templating system doesn't provide them for you, you can still make it work, but it takes some clever filtering or selection queries to actually get these elements when you need to work with them. Also note that I'm using the HTML5 number element for these quantity fields with a min attribute set. Over here in the browser, that means that the browser knows this is supposed to be a number, and I get these little arrows. I can also, in some browsers, hit the up and down arrow keys. In some browsers, if I were to try and type something that's not a number in here, that wouldn't be permitted. Firefox allows it, but I do get some other interactivity here that's helpful, just by setting that element type to number. Now let's look at the JavaScript file. My code is going to be inside this little construct, which is called an immediately invoked function expression. It's a JavaScript idiom where a function is created and then executed immediately. We do this because before ECMAScript 2015, the only way to keep variables from being accessible globally was to put them inside functions. So inside this expression, we're free to name our variables anything we want without fear of screwing up other JavaScript we're also including, which is really important when you have a lot of scripts. This line, use strict, is a special line that turns on JavaScript strict mode inside the function where it appears, to help us avoid making mistakes like accidentally creating global variables and so forth. You don't have to know what that means specifically, but basically it just helps us write better code with fewer mistakes, and that's always a good idea. One more thing to mention, if you're following along and using Visual Studio Code yourself, I've changed a few of its default settings and installed an extension that might be of interest to you. So I open up the settings. What I've changed is I've moved the sidebar location from the left to the right. I've turned off the minimap, which is here. This is checked by default. I've unchecked that. I've turned on word wrap. I'm just using the search field to find all these settings. So it's on now, defaults to off. And I've disabled the breadcrumbs in the editor, right here. I'll close the settings. Looking at the extensions, I've installed the Prettier Code Formatter extension. This can format my code for me with a command. To make things easier for myself, I'm going to turn on Format on Save now that I have this extension installed. Format on Save. This means that every time I save a JavaScript file, it will be run through the Prettier Code Formatter to make all my code nice and keep me consistent. Very handy. Now we've seen where we're starting and where we want to ultimately arrive. Let's get to work.